Hi,
Thank you.
Veronica. How are you? So good to see you.
So good to see you too, Rishi. I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Fine, I'm great. I'm in this lovely city of Bangalore, and thank you for joining us from Italy. Italy is a country where I've never visited, but I would love to one day.
You should. You will always be welcome. I'm in Bologna right now, which is a city in the north. And
I've heard it's a beautiful place. So maybe one day I'll love to come. I want to tell you something. We Indians and Italians share something which is common between us. And for our listeners who are listening to us, the common thing we share is the passion for life and talk and being straight from our heart. I think we always like to connect with people from our heart, and that's I think something common between us. So thank you. I hope we can have a heart to heart conversation today.
I very much agree. I think we're all both like very lively, very alive. And I love that. I feel that
Super,
it's very easy to connect with you
super.
and
Thank
with
you,
Indians in general.
thank you, and it's an open invitation to you. Please visit India whenever you get time.
I would love to.
And
Hopefully
today
one day, hopefully the next conversation will be in person, like the one you had with Daniel.
we had a friend here. We had a friend here just 10 days back, and we had a wonderful conversation on the forced labor regulation. And I encourage our listeners to listen to Daniel's conversation with me. But today's topic is about grievance mechanism. And this is a topic which comes quite often now in front of businesses, that implementing grievance mechanism has become very important. But could you tell about a little bit about your background and why this topic is important to you, Veronica?
Sure. First of all, I'm really happy to be here having this conversation with you, Rishi, really. So I've worked for the past year, I worked at the Remedy Project, which is a social enterprise based in Hong Kong. And they work on advisory services for both the private and the public sector. They focus on business and human rights, and they are specialized, among other things, about on remedy and grievance mechanisms. So during my time there, I've worked on a number of different projects, one of which was, for example, drafting a guidance on how to implement effective grievance mechanism, which is a word that always comes up with grievance mechanisms for businesses.
Hmm.
Another thing I've done, which I think was a very interesting project, was mapping different pathways for remedies, so grievance mechanisms, but also state-based mechanisms for dispute resolution, and also non-judicial mechanisms for in 25 countries.
Hmm.
So to look at that and see where the organization that commissioned this project, where they could do further action.
Got that. So you've been in this space for a while, and I hear that you've done some amazing work. And
Thank you.
I think that'll be a great reference point. The kind of guidelines you were presenting, and I think this topic is becoming more important. We'll talk about the why of it, why we need to do grievance mechanism. I think from my side, there are two areas where this topic is very close to me. One is professionally. I'm founder of a company known as World of Gears. We are advisors to large businesses to implement ESG and HRDD, Human Rights Due Diligence, in its own operations and more importantly with suppliers. So we are the people on the ground assessing risks, working with suppliers, handholding them, training them, building systems. So grievance mechanism obviously becomes an important topic from that perspective. But there's another aspect of it is, and I think some of my friends and close people know that I started my career working in a factory. I've come from the shop floor up, and I've seen some challenging, difficult times on the ground, working in shop floors. And I realized that there is a better way of doing things, and that requires channel and voices of workers to raise their grievances. So this topic is also close to my heart because I'm a firm believer of creating better working conditions for the people who work in factories and farms. And I truly believe when you give voice to people, then continuous improvement happens at workplace level. And it's important that people are able to channelize that. We've seen that a lot in the Japanese systems of continuous improvement, PDCA, Kaizen, and other movements which have happened across the world. So this is a proven thing. But I think when we talk about human rights, this becomes an alien subject. So could you tell us more, like why we need to do this? Like this whole grievance mechanism. Companies are really struggling with it. Why do we need to do this?
It's complicated. I mean, like there is no easy way to approach this issue, the grievance mechanisms, because we're talking about
Mm,
real life issues. And
mm.
the more I get to know you, the more amazed I am by your work, your background. And it's amazing that you can actually relate very much to workers. And now you are on the opposite seat, but you still have that unique perspective of what they need, what could be their preferences, how to engage with them, which is the key element of grievance mechanisms. But why it's important is there are two main objectives of grievance mechanisms. One is to understand if there has been a adverse impact on human rights on an individual worker or a group of workers. But the second one, which is, as you were saying, it could also help the company to improve their policies and processes, because through those information you can understand if there are like systemic issues, if there are issues that affect a broader range of people, if there are trends and patterns. And that's also very important, and that's also something that employers should keep in mind when they implement a grievance mechanism. But of course, it's also important from in terms of like or an authoritative framework. We look at the United Nations guiding principles on human rights, the UNGPs, that always gets mentioned, and they request a number of players to put in place mechanisms that enable workers and rights holders and communities and whoever may be impacted to report a grievance and to get that grievance remediated. So that's the idea. So it could be businesses, but they also require the state or industry bodies, multi-stakeholder initiatives, any other organization that could help in remediating, in ensuring access to remedy. So I think it's really important because it's it's always considered the forgotten pillar, but there have been a lot of initiatives that are trying to take it out from that role, let's say, and to actually strengthen grievance mechanisms and remedy.
Got that. Got that. So I hear from you, this is a very important pillar of the UN guiding principles, in that setting up workplace level grievance mechanisms are important so that people can, share their concerns, and this could be resolved in a structured and a predictable manner. But there's one thing which companies ask in India to me about grievance mechanism. Is it mandatory? Do we have to do this? And we are very far away from Europe. Could you shed some light on what is the kind of regulation which is happening around this topic that companies should give attention to?
Sure. So the UNGPs are not mandatory. It's a type of law that is called soft law. So it's not directly mandatory, although it's highly recommended to follow these international standards. Otherwise, they would not have been created. But the idea of the UNGPs uh, has been put into laws, and most notably the Corporate Sustainability on Due Diligence Directive, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive adopted by the European Union. That makes it mandatory, although directives are not directly applicable, but they will need to be implemented by the member states. But in general, the principles, what is set out by the directive, when implemented by member states, it will be mandatory. I don't want to make it like very technical, but it will be mandatory on companies in scope, which will be most likely, of course, European multinationals. So if a person listening to us is working for, is an employer of an Indian company, they will probably ask, why is this relevant for us? It's relevant because if they work with European multinationals that will be in scope with CSDDD, they will be indirectly expected to have in place a number of systems, policies, procedures, and specifically a grievance mechanism. So to know more about that, it's really important because there will come a time where they will be asked to do that, to implement the mechanism.
Got that. Got that. No, that's helpful to know that Indian companies obviously aspire to work in Europe. We as a country are growing very fast, and Indian businesses are expanding across the world. So it's good for companies to know that if you want to do business in Europe, then grievance mechanism would be an important topic. But there's another interesting thing, on the India side, which sometimes is not fully known, is we have our own reporting structure known as the BRSR reporting, which is mandatory for top 1,000 companies listed on our stock exchange. In that, there is also an element of grievance mechanism and reporting of grievances, etc. So India also has a structure. I think it's for the larger companies at this point, but I feel larger companies then demand this from their suppliers, and then suppliers have to set up those systems. And I think that's where we are at this space. So, regardless of it being mandatory or not, I truly believe by implementing grievance mechanisms, you are creating a better workplace, a culture of continuous improvement, and you're reducing, breakdowns or quality problems or inefficiency in the system. That's all good for a business, no doubt about it. And when people I've seen in India, and I'm sure in Europe as well, there's a lot of diverse workforce sometimes which comes and works together, and there are people from different regions and different languages, cultures, religions, and it's important that we give a voice to everyone to resolve it. Most importantly for women, because women are forming a very big part of the supply chain now, especially in factories and farms. And apart from just having numbers of in terms of employing women, but looking at giving them a voice to raise concerns, issues, so that they can be resolved and the company can be more focused towards problem solving, is what I believe. I normally like to get away from this debate, but it's good for you to tell what's happening in Europe. Could you also tell us some elements which form a good grievance mechanism? Like, if there's a grievance mechanism is a house, how do we build this house?
I like the metaphor actually. And as you were saying, it gives voice to workers that are the foundation of the house, which is the company.
Mm,
But if we look at the house, at grievance mechanism as the house, then the UNGPs, they they tell us what needs to be in the building of this house. So to make it work, to make it effective. So
mm,
there are the effectiveness criteria, and there are a number of them. So maybe this is not the right place to set them out to actually go through each one of them, but I would like to maybe share a few that are critical. So the first one, they say that the grievance mechanism must be legitimate. So we
mm,
always go back to workers. So it needs to be trusted by workers. So if workers feel that they report a grievance and it gets unanswered, so nothing gets done, or something else that could happen, they get punished by management for submitting a grievance, then what's the point? Then it doesn't get trusted. There are ways to build trust. One of which is certainly to engage them in the design of the grievance mechanism. What are their needs? What would they need to access the grievance mechanism? What could be the best entry point for them, the best communication channel, etc., etc. Of course, another thing that is really helpful is if the personnel, the staff, uh, the team that works on the grievance mechanism has been trained and is competent on the procedures, on the rights of the people. And this would be for enabling trust.
mm,
Then it must be accessible. So it needs to be user-friendly. It cannot be very hard to find or very hard to reach, or um, it's not explained anywhere how to access, how to use this mechanism, for instance. And everyone needs to be put in the conditions to access the the mechanism. So if you have if you want to set if you want to for instance get an app on for workers, then you need to ensure that there will be Wi-Fi on the premises for them to log to the app. So that's an example. So we've talked about legitimacy, we've talked about accessibility, and the third one would be predictability. So if there's no time limits for the procedure, then what's the point? So it needs to be time bound. It needs to be clear what will happen at what stage, what workers can expect, and when. Um, yes, And so that's effectiveness in theory. What do
That,
you think about that? What do you
that's
think
great. That's
are the
great.
most
That's great. And I want to also point out to the Principle 31 of the UN Guiding Principles, which also highlights some of the things you shared today. The good thing is there is good guidance on this topic. There is a good
there
structure.
is?
Companies who are taking this on, there is certainly guidance available. What they would need is local capacity to implement this. And you rightly said, training the workers, making them aware. There's a lot of hands-on work which needs to be done. Grievance mechanism is not a topic to be just fulfill on a paper, on like putting up a complaint box, but it is about hearing workers out. And we've seen, a lot of challenges. I obviously come from the factories up, like I shared with you. I spent many years in the shop floor, and I've seen these challenges firsthand. Now I see these challenges in other companies and other factories. But I think one of the biggest challenges is about language. And India, for example, is a land of language. We have more than 200 languages, maybe even more. And so people speak different languages, and sometimes people are from different cultures. And it becomes challenging when a company is operating in a larger region where it is operating in different language, different culture, and having a system which works for them across these regions, sometimes I've seen is a challenge. The second challenge I've seen is especially with gender. I spoke about it a little bit, but on the eastern side of the world, we still have a culture where women are more comfortable talking to another woman about their problems and issues. It's how our societies are oriented. And that actually translates a lot at a worker level or a community level. And we have seen most of supervisors and managers are men, and workers are sometimes women, and they obviously are not very open about talking their day-to-day issues and something which are more private to them. So we've seen that having a gender balanced in terms of engaging with workers certainly helps. That goes a long way. Another thing which I've seen is the informality of problem solving. That many companies actually have good intentions. They do hear workers and they solve problems, but they don't record anything, and they don't do preventive action on it, and then they don't do any analysis on it, or there's no predictability in the system. Some things are solved, some things are not solved. So there's a lot of informality is what we've seen which happens in the system. Another challenge we've seen is, when I was having a conversation today morning where some companies feel uh, label problems as big or small, and workers normally start with smaller problems is what I've seen engaging with workers. They talk about the lack of shoes, lack of dress, lack of resting spaces, lack of clean toilets, lack of sanitary disposal areas. They talk, and maybe sometimes lack of good quality food if a company has a canteen. Workers talk in this language. There could be deeper issues which are there behind that, but discarding these smaller issues actually, you know, damages the trust which you have with workers, and not listening to them properly on their smaller issues. And I've seen this in my own experience working in factories, and I realized that a problem, for the other person might be the whole world for that problem, for the person. For me, it might be a very small problem. And same with me. My problem might look very small to you, but it might be the biggest thing for me in my life. And I think that's a challenge we've seen. The factory culture is such that it disregards smaller problems. It just wants to look at larger problems. That doesn't happen. And lastly, I would say a challenge is that companies rely a lot on complaint boxes. They'll put a box somewhere in one corner of the company and nobody puts anything in it. And companies would claim that, see, we are not getting any complaint. That means this our workplace has no problems. And we all know by experience, all of us who are practitioners, this is like it's just totally false. And just putting a complaint box. And I remember recently, I was doing an impact assessment where a supplier brought a box and put it in front of us and told us, I use this box when the auditors come, we pass the audit and we hide the box back again. So the box is only used to pass the audit and compliances. And so I truly believe, the way of solving problems at a workplace level is based on dialogue, is based on human engagement, is based on a human talking to another human and understanding the problems and challenges on a daily basis. And I've seen some companies have like daily meetings, stand-up meetings, toolbox meetings, and they talk to and speak to workers and they note down their problems and resolve them. Certainly, some companies have hotlines and more advanced systems, but there is no alternative to a human touch and human engagement on the ground. This is what I'm saying. From your point of view, Veronica, where do you think the system breaks or fails?
Wow, you shared a lot of very important challenges that companies and workers are facing at the moment. I wanted to say something first about to get back to some of the things that you've shared. One would be that when workers maybe complain about the menu in the canteen or the um, hygiene of toilets, that could be a test.
Mhm.
That could be a test to see if they trust the system. So it's really, really important that companies do get back to the workers and do something about it. Otherwise, then the whole mechanism is bound to fail. And I think the system breaks in a number of ways. I very much agree with you that human connection is key. Also, the UNGPs think the same because they always talk about meaningful stakeholder engagement and rights holder engagement, and there needs to be like there is no other way. Like there is no way around that. You cannot substitute human interaction with technology. It's not working. I was following a conference the other day. They said that 70% of the issues come up from field work, from going to the field and actually talking to workers, not from hotlines or grievance mechanisms in general. So that's something that some people are actually implementing. For instance, an amazing example that we all look at as something to like as a very good example is the Dindigul Agreement. So for those who are listening that maybe have heard about that but don't really know what it is, it's an agreement that is made between trade unions and brands in the Dindigul, which is in Tamil Nadu, where you are speaking from,
Closer
um,
to that place.
closer to the place.
Yeah.
And the idea was to have a legally enforceable agreement to end gender-based violence. So they have set up a system, including a grievance mechanism, where there are shop floor monitors where women and are part of work and are workers' representatives. They just walk around in the floors and they are available to talk with women workers in case of gender-based violence, sexual harassment, and any other issue that relates to that. And they've also implemented the so-called under the tree model,
Mm-hmm.
which is literally sitting outside under a tree in a very informal setting and have a chat so that you start from maybe a more trivial conversation, and then you can go further down, deep down into the issue. And that has been proving to be working.
Super, super. That's great. Very inspiring. And I'm big fan of under the tree or on the shop floor conversation. And whenever I go in a factory or a farm, I get to know hundreds of problems people are facing on the ground. And it's always good to hear people. And I think hearing is the first point, as you mentioned. Problem solving comes later, first giving the hearing to people. But we're almost on time for our conversation. We can go on for this forever. I think we should do another follow
Yes,
conversation with some examples on grievance
I agree.
implementation. We're already implementing grievance mechanism with some factories in India. And I also encourage our listeners to look at these videos on our YouTube channel and LinkedIn. There are more resources we're putting there. But Veronica, what a pleasure talking to you today. Any last comment or any tip or advice or guidance you want to give to our listeners today?
It was great to having this conversation with you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, I would love to actually share some resources. We could put them down in the description with the websites. So first of all, of course, there will be the most authoritative um, like organization, which is the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and they have shared actually this year they have shared practical guidance on what is an operational level grievance mechanism, what type of issues they should address, etc. And also a very deep guide on the effectiveness criteria that we've talked about. I
Awesome.
would also like to share the Oxfam guidance written by Oxfam, because they give you the different levels that a company can be at. So it could be a beginner, so like easy steps to start, and then it could improve and get better and maybe be more advanced. And then a couple of more resources from Amphori and the the Fair Labor Association, which are multi-stakeholder initiatives, and they provide very practical tips and examples. So we will link that in the description too.
That's super. No, it'll be great to get those links from you. I'll post it with the video. I would say from my side, what the concluding remark would be, companies should consider this as a journey and not to think of starting it at a perfect place. Perfection in grievance mechanism uh, is is a part of continuous improvement and working it over a long period of time. So companies should
Yes.
start small, start with developing mechanisms. They can start listening to workers and recording their problems and solving them in a simple way, and then improving that system over a period of time. Worker awareness and worker engagement and dialogue is supreme in this process, so focus more on that. But also give time. I think some of the companies I speak to, they want to do this in the perfect way from day one. And I always try to share with them that that is a wrong expectation, because this is a system which grows on you, and you have to work on it. So grievance mechanism is a continuous improvement process. And with that, we're almost end of time, but so good talking to Veronica. Here, sending you all our best wishes from India to your life and what you're going to do next. And hopefully, we'll do another session on this, which will be more like example based and case study of kind of things we have seen. And hopefully, we'll see you in India one day and do a session in person.
I would love to have another session with you to have another conversation. And yes, best wishes from here, from Italy. And hopefully we will see each other soon, either in Italy or in India.
Thank you and good luck.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Take care.